What if Germany had actually won World War II? Would the world look like a Wolfenstein game where everyone speaks German and eats bratwurst for breakfast every day? Or would the empire have collapsed under its own weight? In this video, I'll explore an alternative scenario where Germany might have pulled it off, and what that alternative timeline could have looked like. For starters, during World War II, Nazi Germany allied with Fascist Italy and Imperial Japan, forming the Axis powers, where they fought one of the most brutal wars in human history against the Allied powers. I previously made some videos showcasing World War II, which you can watch if you are interested into that. But within the European theater, the Germans were the primary aggressors and succeeded in occupying large portions of Europe, where at one point most areas within continental Europe were influenced by the Axis forces in one way or another. The Germans used very fast-paced blitzkrieg war strategies and overwhelmed many of their enemies rapidly, though ultimately the Axis powers were defeated by the Allies in a decisive defeat. To make an alternative scenario more feasible, I will consider the biggest missteps that the Germans made in my view, and then see how it could have played out differently. Starting with the first mistake. With Operation Barbarossa, I refer to the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. While at first it seemed like a big victory for the Germans as they quickly managed to occupy vast amounts of territory in the largest land invasion in human history. Though as time went on and winter arose, the Germans were pushed back again by the Soviets, creating a very large eastern front that they now had to face. While Germany may have had ideological reasonings for this invasion, it may have been one of Germany's biggest missteps in the war, as the Soviet Union itself was not as likely to attack the Germans directly, and the USSR ended up contributing massively to the eventual downfall of the German regime. So what if Germany never invaded the Soviet Union? Would things have played out differently? So the second mistake I'll consider is the Japanese alliance with Germany. In 1940, the Germans and Italians joined forces with the Japanese, thereby connecting the European and Pacific theaters. While at first this may have looked like a good strategic move, since all three nations had similar ambitions and formed an alliance to increase their global reach. Though in the end, the Japanese did not really help the German war efforts in Europe that much. The Axis had hoped Japan could potentially attack the Soviet Union from the east, but in fact they never did. And worst of all, after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Germany declared war on the United States to help their ally. This actively engaged the US in the war, and since US involvement in World War II was one of the biggest contributors to the fall of the Axis powers, this may not have been the best move of Germany. Ultimately, the German alliance with Japan caused them to become directly involved in war with the US. Therefore, the war could have played out significantly different without this alliance. The third mistake I consider in this scenario is the failure of Operation Sea Lion, which was the German attempt to land in the United Kingdom. In the Battle of Britain, the Germans suffered a major defeat and afterwards stopped planning an invasion of the UK entirely, leaving a major threat in the West that required protection and also giving naval superiority of the Channel fully in British hands. While I don't think it's very likely that the Germans would have actually made a successful landing in the United Kingdom, since the British Navy was vastly superior to the German one, though for the sake of this video I'm going to assume that instead of a full-scale invasion, the Germans either succeeded in subduing a peace treaty with the British, or at least managed to stall the war with them for longer. As the Germans had hoped that after the fall of France, the UK would accept a peace agreement, where Germany controls most of continental Europe and where the British can remain their empire. So what would have happened if Germany succeeded to force a peace treaty? Though these three things were not the only strategical missteps from the German side if you ask historians, though for the sake of this video I'll leave it with these ones. Now let's see the scenario where these mistakes would have not occurred, or at least went differently. To start off, I believe that the start of the war would have gone quite similar. With the Germans already having annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia, the Germans and Soviets would attack Poland, forcing them into a war with Britain and France. After gaining control over Norway and Denmark, the Germans would use their blitzkrieg strategy to invade the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and eventually France, successfully defeating their Western Front. After this, the Germans would attempt to negotiate with the British to take them out of this war, as they knew a full-scale invasion of the United Kingdom was unlikely to be successful at this stage. Therefore, the Battle of Britain would have never happened. Instead, they would focus on other parts of the war. The Italians at the same time were fighting a war against Greece, and since they were not doing too well, the Germans would send forces over to help them. The Germans could subdue several Balkan nations to either join them or otherwise take them by force, to then defeat the Greek together with the Italians and other Axis forces. Now this scenario looks quite similar to the actual events of World War II, though in this scenario the Germans don't attack the Soviet Union, which they did in real life. Instead, they would focus all their war efforts on their last remaining enemy in direct war with them, the UK. While the British would still have naval superiority, the majority of continental Europe is now under German influence. With the Axis not involved with the USSR, the Germans would now have full research capacity directed to the United Kingdom. They would either try to weaken them or prepare for a full-scale invasion. No matter the approach, they would require a favorable peace outcome. Let's say they managed to get the British to sue for peace, though it is unlikely that they would manage a full peace treaty where they gain control of the entirety of Britain, but they could perhaps force an agreement in their favor, where the UK would either join the Axis forces or at least not oppose them. With the UK now out of the war, the Germans would have effectively won the war in Europe. Even though the United States did support the UK, they were unlikely to directly engage in the war if they weren't provoked first, which wouldn't have happened since the Axis powers would not have been allied with Japan. With the US out of the picture, this would have left Germany with no direct wars anymore. Though what if the Axis powers actually wanted to still invade the Soviet Union after reaching this point? Perhaps at this point Japan could actually come into play, but that is where I leave this for this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.